say your name into the camera, please?
My name is Carl Bushard.
Oh, Bushard.
From originally from near Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
Carl, what?
Bushard.
Carl Bushard.
Bushard.
What war were you in?
What?
What war were you in?
World War II.
World War II. A little bit low.
You need the letters, Kevin. Why don't you move up a little closer?
In the European theater of the World War II. He was in Asiatic theater.
Were you drafted?
Oh yeah.
How did you feel about that?
Do what?
How did you feel about being drafted? Were you for?
You didn't have any feelings. You didn't have any choice. There wasn't anything to say about it. I might say that I had taught school 4 years. I had a wife and a baby on the way. Baby was born 6 weeks after I was drafted. And but by the time my time came, they were scraping the bottom of the barrel to find more people to fill the call for duty. And so I told them, no, I won't accept a deferment. And I have no need for do not want to go the rest of my life thinking I'd have dodged my duty. So I went into the draft, and that was late July of '43. And basic training at Camp Gruber, Oklahoma. And then sent a couple of places along the way, Camp Phillips, Kansas, and anyway, wound up at POE in New York, and from there we sailed to England. And this all was in about September '43. And in England, of course, we were trained, kept in good physical condition. We had our basic training, but kept in physical condition with long hikes all over the countryside there in England, and keeping in shape until the time finally came to cross the Channel into France, into Normandy. And that period of time lasted probably at least maybe more than 6 weeks from the time we shipped over there till we crossed the Channel. It was probably a period of 6 weeks. I know. So they kept us in good physical condition with long hikes and bivouacs, and it was pretty tough before we even got into the waters of the Channel and waded up to my chest and water with a full field pack on my back and my rifle and 4 hand grenades and 4 bazooka rounds. And that weight kept my feet anchored in the ground into the sand, I guess you'd say. And otherwise I might have tipped over because the weight of that pack on me anchored me. Otherwise I doubt that I'd have made it in. Lots of them didn't. After getting pushed off the barge, shoved off the barge, why, then it was up to us to get to the land. We had about, I don't know, probably 25, 30 yards or more of wading to do before we get up out of the water.
Right. What branch did you go into?
Infantry.
You went right straight into the infantry? So you were on the front line, huh?
There's no such thing as front line.
No.
I don't go with that. Front lines fiddle. You didn't know which end of where you're going to get shot in the back or in the front. The Germans were all over the place. They were home there in Normandy. They had wives and kids they'd raised. They'd been there for 4 or 5 years, and so we were invading their home backyard, and they knew where to go to be behind us. And people don't realize that in Normandy you didn't fight like in World War I, lobbing shells over that direction. Though, it's the Germans, but you're liable to get shot from any direction in Normandy.
But that was
at least where we were there.
That was pretty scary, huh? Did you think about that while you were
Think about what?
being like shot at any time?
Well, sure. In fact, I was just telling him a while ago coming over here that I had a first sergeant standing right beside me. A bullet hit him right, I don't know just where, but I'd say between the eyes, but that's normal condition. But anyway, he just fell over dead. Just didn't even flinch. Didn't make a sound, just hit the ground. And a few minutes later, the lieutenant says, "Roll him over there, Private Bushard. We got to get through here." So I had to roll a 240-pound first sergeant over out of the path so that the rest of the guys could get through there.
So you did see a lot of combat. How I saw.
No, you brought up a subject there about how long it was. It was about June the 10th, somewhere along there, and I was wounded on July the 3rd. Now, that's not very long to be in combat. But in the meantime, I saw guys, replacements come in, and replacements come to replace the replacements. I mean, it wouldn't last more than 2 or 3 days. And in some cases, they come in at night, in the nighttime, they'd come into our section, and then by the next day they'd be gone. Never see them again. Be dead. Or shipped back wounded. Life was very short there. And that's why I say I wasn't in combat very long, from about June the 10th to the 3rd of July. And I spent from 3rd of July till after Christmas in hospitals. 2 weeks there in Normandy in a tent, great big tent like in MASH. And then from there, sent to England, where I spent the rest of the 6 months. I got out of the hospital right after Christmas, a day or two after Christmas. Did they send me home to my wife and baby? They sent me into the Air Force. I wasn't in using the infantry anymore. So they sent me to the Air Force, where the colonel was trying to find a place for all of you worn out, broken down infantrymen, places for them they could help there in the base, the troop carrier base. C-47 pulling gliders. Well, anyway, he was trying to find a place for each one of the guys on the line, working on the engines and being a courier and different kind of things they could do. I said, "Well, sir, I had typing in high school." "You had typing in high school?" I said, we can use you right there in the office." So I spent 8 months in the Air Force typing on a typewriter. Wouldn't that have been nice if I had done that in the beginning, like the other guys working there? Of course, they went up through Africa. They got Bronze Stars. There were some of those guys in that Air Force troop carrier group that had Bronze Stars they earned from working 18, 20 hours straight, moving things, and just terrible hard work sometimes, moving from one place to the other. And so I don't make any try to put down anything that they did. They worked hard during their time in Africa, but when they got up to England, pretty well stabilized.
Do you think you could speak on some of the time you spent in Norway? Could you talk about some of the time you spent in Norway and in France? You went through Norway and France? That's what I have here.
Normandy.
Oh, I'm sorry. So Normandy and France, do you think you could talk about that a little bit?
I can't hear you.
Do you think you could talk about the time you spent in Normandy and France also?
Digging foxholes each night to sleep in? What do you mean, spent the time? We moved many as 5 times in a night, and each time they'd say, "Dig in," and you'd scrape out a little place to lie down, try to get below the surface, so if a mortar landed close by, it'd go by you, over you. And one special night, we moved 5 times in one night. We were chasing the Germans, of course, who were, I suppose, hightailing it back to Germany. Although Normandy was their home then for the last. I wonder how many years they were there. 4 or 5 years in Normandy? Have any idea? I don't know.
Was that long?
But we didn't. Talking about girls in France, Normandy.
Yeah, there you go.
I saw 2 girls one time lying there on my tent, looking out the wall tent of the hospital, big long hospital tent. Looking out there, here's two girls chasing two cows. But they were encumbered. They had wooden shoes on. They kicked those wooden shoes on. They went spinning out through there, and they chased down after those cows. That's my experience with French women over in the war. Those two girls chasing those cows down past our tent. Romantic.
Yeah. Did you have any free time while you were in the Army, or was it constant training? Or like
In England, we did. Not free time. It was nighttime, and we didn't. I mean, we drilled in the daytime, and at night, quite often we go to town. Wilmslow, a little town of they call it a village, 35,000 people. They call it a village, and we'd go in there and they'd have bars and all that, which I avoided diligently, and met a real nice couple, the Sutherwoods, and they took me into their home. And one of those, talking about the training we did, we went on a bivouac one time, and I had a bad cold when I went. And stay all night in the rain, and slept out in the rain, like we'd have to do normally later. Well, anyway, they back to camp. The normal thing would be to go to the medic if you're sick. They'll give you an aspirin or aspirins. You know that. Maybe you don't. But anyway, then aspirins are cure-all for or kill. Anyway, I knew that's what I'd get. So I went back to town, went to town, and to these Sutherwoods, and that man took me upstairs and put me to bed. And the next morning brought my breakfast to me at about 10 o'clock in the morning. On that tray was an egg, toast, marmalade, and if you've been to England, you know what marmalade is the most common thing there. Marmalade, toast, and one egg, and 2 strips of bacon. That one egg was one of the 3 eggs he got that month on his rations. Now, if you're not impressed with the hospitality that we got over there, that I got over there, now, if I had gone to a tavern somewhere, they'd rolled me and got my money, and that's the kind of story I'd told back home. But I don't have that kind of story to tell. I'll tell about the wonderful, wonderful people over there that when I got back in the hospital, before I was dismissed from the hospital, they gave us passes. I was ambulatory. I was able to get around, so I went to town to see these people. They opened the door. My God, we didn't think we'd ever see you again alive. That's just the way they greeted me. We didn't think we'd ever see you again alive.
Well, I guess you were happy that you were alive then. You said you were in the hospital. How you were injured in battle?
What do you mean by that?
Were you injured in combat? You said you were in the hospital.
I wasn't in there for a bad cold.
No.
I had my liver and gallbladder busted, and a shell fragment through my ribs, and a piece in my neck. And Captain Quimsey, that's not quite right. Anyway, after a few days, I was able to be talked to and with. He said, I don't know what in the world you're doing here alive. If I had 1,000 men wounded exactly like you, they'd all be dead. But here you are still alive. So was I wounded?
How well were you taken care of in the hospital?
What?
Do you remember any of the nurses or anything while you were in the hospital?
I remember better the Red Cross girls. After 2 weeks of stabilizing me there in England, in Normandy, so they could send me back, if I'm going to live, back to England. After 2 weeks of that, then I wound up in England in a brand new facility for wounded. I don't know what you call it, a rehab place. We were able to get around by that time. They wouldn't release us otherwise. Anyway, in there, so we came in there, and here was 40 beds, 20 on each side, all empty but 4, I and 3 other guys. And next morning I woke up, what are you doing here? Beautiful, tall, black-haired, dark-haired brunette girl in Red Cross uniform sitting there on my cot. So I said, what are you doing here? She said, well, I've been looking at your record on the foot of the cot, and so that the doctors could, find it. Anyway, I've been looking at it, and I see you have a wife and baby at home. Would you like us to send a message to them? Now, how do you know that message, and this was a little over 2 weeks after I was wounded, she sent that message home, and it got home before the Army message, tersely saying, your husband been seriously wounded on Cotentin Peninsula. That was the extent of the message she got from them. But she had already received the one from the Red Cross telling them that I had said in there, to the girl, I said, tell my wife I'm not going to be left crippled or blind. I'll be okay when I get home. And she knew that then. But with that Army message, she didn't know what kind of shape I was going to be in when I got home.
So you weren't able to contact your wife? You weren't able to send her letters?
Well, yeah.
You sent her... did you send her letters, like, often?
No. They had what they called V-mail. Not email, but V-mail. They'd take your letter you wrote in longhand and take a picture of it and reduce it down to about 4 by 5, and that's what my wife got. And partner had to use, I don't know if she had to use magnifying. I don't think she had to use a magnifying glass. But anyway, it was reduced in size so that it didn't take too many shiploads of mail to get back to the States. She got many of those V-mails from me while I was in the hospital, and later when I was assigned to the Air Force, and I wrote home to her regularly.
How close were you with your group of people that you went over to England with?
Not very. I didn't shoot craps and didn't gamble. And on the way over, they assigned me to guard the kitchen, give me a loaded rifle, and say, you stay right here and see the guys don't come in here and go eating at night. That was for 8 days. It took 8 days to get Dodge submarines and get over there across the ocean. 8 days. And I was on 4 hours on and 4 hours off all that time going across the ocean. So I didn't have much time for shooting dice and things like that, like on the deck, like a lot of guys did.
Did you experience any
What?
Did you experience any seasickness?
No. I'm like that Captain Quims. I can't quite call his name, but he says, I don't understand it. What you're doing here alive, he couldn't figure it out, and I've been that way ever since. And I was that way then. I don't get seasick. I didn't get seasick going over there, and didn't get seasick coming back.
When you came back, did you come back with a bunch of troops or anybody you knew?
This is an interesting story to me, maybe not to anybody else, but there was one fellow on that bunch of guys going back home that had been in the 79th Division, the Cross of the Lorraine Division, with me, and in my company. One fellow, I knew him then, and on that boat I met him. He says there are 8 men of the company roster of the original men. 8 names are still there. The rest of them are all replacements. How many in the company? Out of 120 men, I guess it'd be more than that. I don't know. I don't remember those figures anymore.
Did you, on your way back, were you talking about the war and your experiences with the other soldiers around?
No, wasn't any use in that.
No.
But again, I was only in combat 3 weeks. I didn't have a whole lot of experiences. The only experiences I had was moving around from one place to the other at night and digging a hole in the ground to sleep in and running into firefight once in a while, but not very often. You don't do that very often. You don't live through them. The firefights you get into, most of them don't get back. And we went on night patrol. We'd reconnoiter ahead where the company could come on up forward. We'd go send a scouting troop up there, see for sure there weren't some Germans dug in. And that happened at night. And one time, there's about 8 of us were assigned to this scouting mission, and one fellow's shoe squeaked when he walked. They sent him back. You go on back to the company, back to the area. Couldn't walk at night with your shoes squeaking, sneaking up around the Germans. Well, anyway, and then that same night, we heard rustling going across there. One of the fellows, he shouldn't have done it, but he fired. It was a dog. And the next day, when we reassembled and went by that place, there lay that dog that he'd killed at night in the dark by the sound of the dog. That's just a little experience.
That's good. Do you know anybody, like any of your friends, were they taken as prisoners of war? Was anybody you knew taken as prisoners of war?
Anybody I knew who did what?
Who was taken by the enemy?
Oh, no. No.
After the war, what was your? Did you go back to teaching, or what was your occupation after you?
I went to school on the Public Law 16 of the GI Bill. Now, everybody says, the GI Bill, huh? Well, the GI Bill had lots of issues in it. One of them was 346. That was for the common, ordinary guy that got out of the service without getting wounded and didn't have any disabilities. But if you got wounded and had disabilities, and was drawing a disability pension, you also got, went on Public Law 16, had quite a few advantages over the 346, all in a GI Bill. Public Law 16 and Public Law 346. And I don't know how many others, but anyway,
So you went to college?
I had 87 hours when I went into the service at Cape Girardeau at Southeast Missouri State College. And so I went back there after I got home and finished that. And then I went out to
Greeley.
Where was it?
Greeley.
Where was it?
Greeley, Colorado.
Oh, my old head just falls apart sometimes. Got my master's degree out now when I leave here, I said, why in the world didn't I? No, I can't even think of the name of the university. It's, Colorado.
Is that UNC? University of North Colorado?
Hmm?
University of North Colorado? Is that UNC?
No.
Not UNC?
No, it was Greeley.
Greeley.
At Greeley.
Okay.
That's where I got my master's degree. And it was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful situation there.
What was your master's degree in? What did you get your degree in?
Vocational education.
I see that you play the clarinet on here.
Yeah.
How long have you been playing clarinet? Do you still play?
Oh, no. No, kind of a sad story I guess I shouldn't tell about it here. About had to give it up. But anyway, no, I graduated from high school in 1934, and about the middle of that year, I was acquainted with a campaign to build up the 140th Infantry Band, and you could go and get lessons, and the instrument issued you by being enlisting in Missouri National Guard. And that's a pretty serious decision to do, enlist in the National Guard, to get music lessons and get to be in a band. And I played 5.5 years in that band up until late in '39, and had to get out of there when I went my first teaching job. There's an interesting story. In order to accept my contract to teach, I had to be able to sign a contract. Well, I was in the National Guard, and that teaching job was going to be conflict with being in the camp. And you don't conflict with being in the camp if you're in the National Guard. You go. And I knew it. And I knew that if I appealed for discharge from the National Guard 30 days in advance of camp time, then you might be okay. And I went to the lieutenant, and I think it was about 2 days before the deadline, and he gave me a discharge from the National Guard. So from then on, I was not in the National Guard anymore after 5.5 years. But that way I was able to sign that contract and take a teaching job. Position.
Where did you teach at? A grade school? A high
Risco,
school?
Missouri, and 5th and 6th grade, and then the last year was just the 6th grade only. And from then on, I went to the replacement office in college at Cape Girardeau, to Hattie Eichel, the replacement officer. And I said, I'd like to find a bit better paying and more advanced job. I think I've qualified enough now that I can teach industrial arts. And I said, you think you can find me a place? She looked in her files. Here's a place up north of St. Louis. So I went up and taught up there 1 year. And then that's when I got my draft call after that year. So I taught 3 years in grade school at Risco and 1 year up at North St. Louis. I can't think of the name of the community up there. By the way, did you know that St. Louis is not in St. Louis County? It's not in a county.
I do know that. I'm from St. Louis, actually.
Hmm?
I'm from St. Louis, actually.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
St. Louis is not in St. Louis County. It's not in a county.
Right. I live in St. Louis County. But, yeah.
Baden?
No, I live in Hazelwood, Florissant.
Huh?
North County. I live in more north.
You know where Baden is, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Up the north end of the streetcar line.
Is that where you were?
I lived in Baden and taught up there, that little town above that asbestos plant. Asbestos in the air, you drive through there. You remember the asbestos plant? You're too young.
I can't say that.
They quit making asbestos, cement board.
I know that it was causing some problems. People are getting
It caused
sick
lots
off
of
it.
problems.
Yeah.
Bankruptcy.
One of the many. How old were you when you were drafted?
Well, I was 29 years old. Yeah. And all those kids that in the squad there with me, and I was just a PFC, and some of them were staff sergeants. And not just in the squad, I don't mean that, but in the company. And I was a PFC because I hadn't had any military experience after I got out of the National Guard, and that wouldn't have qualified me much anyway. But no, I was only in less than 2 years in the service, in the military, in the Army. You got drafted in July and got out in 45. July 43 and got out in 45, about the same time. But yeah, but I don't remember. July or August, something like that, when I got my discharge.
Would you say that you enjoyed your time in the Army, or was it total stress?
No, I had a wife at home, and I wrote every night, or called her. And then when the baby was about to come, for 2 weeks, I guess it was, every night I'd line up with the guys and till I get to the phone and call and talk to her mother. You know, the baby hasn't come yet. And in the meantime, she said, I've taken Hazel, my daughter, your wife, to Aunt Bess there in Cape Girardeau, just in the shadow of the Southeast Missouri Hospital, about 2 blocks from the hospital. She's going to stay there till the baby comes, with an aunt, my wife's mother's sister. Very fortunate circumstance. And so there's where she lived for about 2 weeks before the call came to go to the hospital, and when the baby was born. And this is an interesting story that nobody's going to believe, that when the baby was born, I've learned that right away. I have to tell this like it happened. Some fellow came down from the headquarters of the Red Cross at Camp Gruber, Oklahoma, with a 5-day furlough. Says Private Carl Bushard wanted to find me, and he got me this 5-day furlough to go home at the end of our baby being born. Well, I got home, hitchhiked home, took about a day and a half, 2 days to do that, and 5 days. How much time did that leave to be there and then get back? Same way. So my father-in-law, with his Abraham Lincoln education, 4 years, or 16 months actually, he says, why don't you call down there and tell them you need more time? And anybody in the service at that time now would laugh, say, why, you crazy? He's lucky to get home at all. And anyway, I did. At his insistence, I called, and the company commander was right there at his desk when I started trying to tell him what happened and how could I have more time. He said, take 7 more days, and hung up.
Wow.
So I had 12 days. I got back to camp, and after the furlough was over, and so one guy said, where in the hell you been? I told him. He said, well, I didn't get home when my baby was born. I said, well, did they call the Red Cross? The Red Cross was the organization that was the go-between between servicemen and his home. If he had a complaint or need, or they needed him or something, they went through the Red Cross for verification. So this doctor, when the baby was born, he says, I've had this lady on the delivery table for 8 hours. Her husband needs to be home. Get him home. So that Red Cross there sent a message over to Camp Gruber, Oklahoma Red Cross office, and they come running down with a furlough. That's how I got my furlough. I didn't get it by asking for it. My family couldn't have got it by asking for it.
That's lucky.
No, it's not lucky.
No?
It's not. It's God-given. It's God. I don't call it luck. It happened.
How long was it afterwards till you got to see your wife and child till you got out? What was it, a year or two?
How long was what?
Till you got to go back and see them. How long did it take? Like, did you... Let's see.
I'm not following you. How long did it take to get back?
How long was it after you seen them till you saw them again till you went back to go see them? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I hadn't been overseas yet. See, baby was born just 6 weeks after I was drafted. This all happened very shortly after I got in the service. I hadn't even gone overseas.
Okay. Let's see. How are we doing on time?
Pretty good. You're ready to go to segment 6, I think. Are you on 6?
Well, there's lots of good things happened in the time I was there. I met a lot of awful good people in homes. They invited me to come into their home over in England. And after the war, Queen Elizabeth invited the servicemen who had been over and helped them get freed from Germany, from Hitler, invited them over for, come to visit. So my wife and I went over. This was 1975. And this was 1945 1945. We were talking a while ago, but this was 1975. We were invited to come over, and this gave us a booklet of coupons and what all. And so, my wife and I, we liked to tour those old castles that had been abandoned for 1,500 years, way back. We toured some of those old castles, and one of them had a moat around. Well, most of them had moats, water around them for protection. And they had a man stationed there, paid by the government, I guess, to say, well, I'll row you across the moat so you can go and see in the castle. And he charged us a quarter. So that'd be a shilling. And then he came after us, hollered and said, hey, I wasn't supposed to charge you. You're a guest of the Queen. Made me take my money back. What little money it was.
Right. When did you retire from teaching?
70. I don't remember the exact date. 75, I'll say, but it was a little earlier than that. See, I retired early age. I was only 57 years old when I retired, and had a lot of wonderful experiences after that. Going to Campus Crusade for Christ International Headquarters at Camp Gruber at San Bernardino, California, each winter, and that's an experience that took I'd like to have time to talk about that, but you can't. Really nice people.
Well, to conclude, is there anything you would like to talk about that you've been wanting to talk about? Tell you any stories that you remember that you just want to...
Military stories?
Yeah.
No. Nothing over there in those short 3 weeks, but preparing to get killed. And there were guys going into town on pass, and that's how I met the Sutherwoods. And they invited me at home, and then later when I got wounded and came back to see them, we didn't think we'd ever see you again. It was really a tense moment.
Well, how did you end up here in this veterans home?
I had been over here on a kind of a exploratory. I wasn't at all thinking about being here. But my wife and I drove over here. We were going to go down to Louisiana, Missouri, and cross and put our feet on good old Missouri soil right across the river. But we didn't get that far. We came down this hill where 24 comes along there, and there's a little sign about 2 feet square, Veterans Home. I said, let's go up there and look around. So we came up here and drove in and talked to them about, and my wife was all right then, but not too many months or a year after that, she began to show signs of Parkinson's. Her sister had died of Parkinson's about 20 years earlier, and when this sign began to show up, we knew just exactly what's going to happen. It's a genetic disease. It's not, you don't get it from germs. You're born with it. Somebody in the family is going to have it if somebody else previously have had it, and they call it a genetic. It's in your genes, not in your pants. Genes. that's crude. Well, anyway, and so when that began to show those signs of tremor, which weren't the most vital sign, she never did have bad tremors, but some. And so we came back over here. It was about 2 years after we'd been over here reconnoitering the place, and talked with them, and found the rules and how I'd have to come too. They didn't want me to bring my wife over here and then leave her and then maybe never see me again. That's what they said. That happened too often, so we put a stop to that. If you want your wife who is not a veteran to be in here, then you have to come too. That's a rule here, and it's a good rule. Okay, I didn't mind coming over here. I was still. I used to run all over this creation when I first came. In fact, I had a new Cadillac. This was 1997 when it came. 1997. I had 1997 Cadillac, brand new. I bought over at Valdez and Pekin, and anyway, I drove that car in about a year, 75,000 miles. While my wife was, as our three daughters said, she won't know when you're here and when you're not, and if you want to take a little trip somewhere or something. My residence was still here, see, and I was paying $978 a month for my bed and breakfast, dinner and lunch. And anyway, I had lots of time, and I did a lot of traveling around between here and home. I still had my house there, Canton, Illinois, and hadn't sold it yet. Finally, then I drove in the stone gates there, the big white stone gates. Couldn't hardly see. What's happening? So I crept around down behind Cottage 22, parked my car, and called my son-in-law. Said, "I'm afraid you better come and get my car. I don't think I ought to drive anymore. And when it gets dusk, well, I can't see. In broad daylight, I could see all right. So I was driving, and then I got up to that gate, and by that time it was dusk, and I could see that I had no business driving anymore. So I had to get rid of the car. He sold it for me, my son-in-law. Got an overbooked price for it, he said.
Right, I think that's good. I want to thank you for letting me talk to
Well,
you.
I'm glad.
It was nice.
Glad
Very
to
nice to meet you, sir.
Farrell's heard all this before. He was,
Carl, thank you so much.
oh, thank you.
This is excellent. We got a really good interview.
What's the name of that town up north St. Louis, up above St. Louis, up by the Chain Rocks Bridge?
North St. Louis, Kevin.
Is that when you were teaching in Rankin?